This afternoon, the Government is asking us to vote confidence in it, and we in Labour cannot do that. We have never had confidence in this Government to address the housing disaster, to address the childcare crisis, the spiralling cost of living, or indeed the climate catastrophe. In 2020, we did not support the election of the Taoiseach, and now we believe in the need for a change of government, because we believe that the project of Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party has been unsuccessful. Despite their stated aims, they are simply not delivering the desired and necessary outcomes or results. On Fianna Fáil, it has long professed it is the party of home ownership and house building. Yet since this government took office, we know the housing crisis has deteriorated. Rents have increased by 15%, house prices by 22%, homelessness by 19%, with over 3,000 children and over 1,300 families now homeless. That's without mentioning those who do have homes, but fear that they will collapse due to mica, pyrite or construction defects. And as the Fianna Fáil Minister for Health grapples with the two-tier health system his party ushered in alongside the Progressive Democrats, the promise of childcare remains distant, and indeed waiting lists remain unforgivably long for so many basic services for so many adults and children. And Fine Gael finds itself similarly unequipped to deal with the challenges of its own portfolios. In the midst of an enormous cost of living crisis, the best that party can promise is a 5-year wait for a living wage. After the trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has produced a sick pay scheme which will cost lower-income workers money, and flexible working legislation, so-called, which empowers employers to say no, a right to refuse, not a right to remote work. On the Green Party, a party which shares many policies and aspirations of my own, it has managed to pass some climate legislation, and we've supported that. But it is incapable, it appears, of pushing its own government colleagues to meet those legally binding targets. And so we see a standoff on agriculture emissions and on peat, all the while the countdown to climate catastrophe keeps ticking. In childcare, the government has bound itself to examine the introduction of a universal public scheme by the First Five funding model, and that's welcome. But that does not appear to be on the horizon, despite ongoing poverty wages for those working in the sector and exorbitant costs for parents. So inequality in Ireland starts the day a baby is born, and that should not be how it is in a republic. This country deserves a government with the imagination to do better, a government that can be relied on to act in the common good for all its people, that will build affordable homes on public land, that will lead the charge on climate justice and a just transition, and that will bring about a genuine Donna O'Malley moment to ensure universal public childcare and early years education for our youngest citizens and people. A government which will ensure that nobody languishes on waiting lists for CAMs, for medical intervention, for special classes or autism assessments. A government which treats care work with the respect it deserves and which will work for the unity of the island in the spirit of John and Pat Hume. Unfortunately, I remain unconvinced that this government can deliver on any of that. We acknowledge the many challenges that this government has, that we all have. The brutal war in Ukraine, the ongoing effects of the COVID pandemic, and of course the spiralling cost of living. As inflation has skyrocketed, we know that individuals and families are struggling to put food in their mouths and roofs over their heads. But we also know that there are solutions to these complex problems and that there is a way to address these challenges. And we believe in a Labour vision, a constructive and alternative vision for change, based on a centre-left, social democratic philosophy and set of principles, based on the introduction of key measures, genuinely free education, genuinely free childcare and early years education, windfall profit taxes on energy companies, immediate increases in the minimum wage and social welfare rates, a rent freeze and new measures to drastically reduce rents and to ensure the building of more homes as a matter of urgency. We offer that alternative vision, and we offer a vision on climate justice and on a just transition also. And I should say that something which is notably absent from the no confidence motion brought by Sinn Féin is a mention of climate, a strange omission not to include anything on climate in that motion. As climate spokesperson, I've certainly given the Green Party its dues for the measures it's sought to introduce in government. But we know its coalition partners are simply not willing to do what's necessary to ensure that we address the real existential crisis in climate and in biodiversity. We need a government which will integrate economic planning with a stronger climate response to take us to net zero as quickly as possible and to make Ireland the renewable superpower that we can be, and to support the creation of decent jobs through a just transition too. Last Count Corley, there's a really pressing case for change. The reality is that younger generations in Ireland are now growing up worse than their parents who came before them, that young people are locked out with no prospect of secure, affordable homes, that workers on low pay and in precarious conditions are struggling to get by rather than getting on. We know that Ireland needs a pay rise, and we know that the state can and must deliver a new social contract with real change offered on housing, on care, on climate and on more. We need to build an equal, sustainable Ireland, contributing proudly to our European and international future. But we can only do this if those holding the levers at power levels understand that change can't wait, and if they're ambitious enough to do more, to do better in delivering tangible results. The tone of too much of this debate has been one of mock outrage, of mock anger, and I think that's not helpful. We've sought in this party, in Labour, to bring a constructive approach to opposition, to put forward genuine alternatives, to try and address the real challenges that all of us hear every day from our own constituents and from people across this island. We meet people struggling to make ends meet. We meet parents forced to become full-time campaigners for the basic rights of their children, particularly autistic children and those with a disability. And week in, week out, we know the sand is running out as we fail to tackle the climate disaster. So my conviction, Last Count Corley, is the government we need is a government of the left, a government that understands that the purpose of the state is to deliver for the common good of all, to deliver and to harness state action to deliver on housing, on childcare and early years education, on healthcare and on climate. And that's not this government.